So, I grew up in St. Xavier, Montana. I attended the Pretty Eagle Catholic School from kindergarten to pretty much till my 8th grade year. And the house we lived in, we called it the White House across the field because it literally was across the field, it felt like, or was. And I can remember all the time waking up in the middle of the night and hearing the TV on. And that was my alarm clock because if the TV was on, it meant that my grandpa was awake. So I would get up, go to the living room, and then when I got to the living room, the TV would turn off. And I know I wasn't the only one who witnessed this. I had other siblings tell me about that too. But we tell our grandma, and she would say, "Oh, it's technology or something," was with the house. And then the school itself was actually a boarding school, and my mom attended that school when it was a boarding school, and she said that the building had the dorm was up above the school, and the top floor was the boys' dorm. Then it went the little girls, then the big girls, and the little boys were beneath them. And the showers for the boys was on the top floor, and then the girl showers was on the floor above the little boys. And she said that when they were in school, one day they woke up to the nuns ringing a bell telling them to come outside, you guys got to exit, and they're all going down the stairway in single lines, all the grades were. And they took him across the field. They took him across the road in the field right by the school and had him sit there. And the priest, who had a housing unit on the other side of the school, was alerted that, there's a strange smell coming from the boiler room. And the chapel for the nuns was beneath the school. And it was by the boiler room. So when he went in there, I don't know, his father something, who was a Catholic priest, when he went in there to find out what was going on, he pulled the light switch, which was a cord. And when he did that, the boiler room exploded. And it sucked him in and then pushed him out. So we always knew that there was something in that school. And it was creepy because where the boiler room is, that's exactly where it is today when it was the boarding school. And we had my grandpa and other people were the caretakers there. And every night after midnight, between midnight and 3 a.m., the school building would call and tell us that the boiler room's defective and somebody needs to come check on it. And it would say the time, the date, and we'd write it down. Me or my siblings or my grandma would be woken up in the middle of the night, and we'd go with my grandpa to check it out. And it was always nothing. And the school itself was creepy because you could tell that there was something there. When the nuns lived in there on the other side of the building, they moved out. Like, I think I was like in 5th or 6th grade when they all had left back to St. Oldenburg to retire. At least the last one that was remaining did. And 3 or 4 years ago, I went to that school to visit. And I went into the nun side to use the bathroom. And I still call it the nun side. And when I went in there, I could still smell their spices that they cooked with. And it smelled like they were there. Which is really weird because they had concession stands in there. They had different events in that room, but it still smelled like them. It's just kind of creepy. And on the school property, there's other buildings that they used at one time for classrooms for when they were rebuilding the school. The gymnasium, which is right across from the school now, that's really old. And I didn't know that until like 5 years ago that the school was used for, the gymnasium was used for them to be in, to cook and clean, and have study sessions in there. And that's old. That's just as old as the boarding school was when it was standing. And that has a lot of history in it. Because I remember when we were in the locker room, us girls were getting ready for a volleyball game. The light to go into the light for the locker room was right by the entrance, and it's a long hallway. And it was me and 2 other girls, and we were sitting there putting on our knee pads. And I remember the light turned off, and we screamed because we thought it was the varsity girls messing with us. And we jumped up, and it was dark. Like, you couldn't even see the person next to you. So I had to, with memorization, remember, okay, straight across from me where I was sitting is the lockers, and I held on to those, and I walked all the way down to the end of the hallway and turned the light on. And when I turned the light on, 3 of the showers in the locker room were on by themselves, and we screamed and ran out. And our coach was like, pissed. I think she was scared, but she presented it as pissed. And that place has a lot of history to it. Like, you can feel it, and it's creepy because the Monday through Friday, that place is alive with people. But after 3:30 on Fridays, well, actually after 4:30 on Fridays, it becomes dead again, like desolate, and it doesn't see anybody until Sunday, when church happens, or little events that the school has. But other than that, it's like a ghost town. And I always used to think that the ghosts wandered to our house because that's where all the people were. We lived across the field from a cemetery. All of us had a different story for something going on in that home, but each time my grandma would just, brush it off as the house is settling. Like one time, it was wintertime, 2 winters before we left. So I would have been in 7th grade, my 7th grade winter there. Me and my grandpa were home alone because there was a big storm coming, and my grandma and my mom and my sisters went to town. And we were stuck out there. Me and my grandpa. We're 22 miles from Hardin, 23 miles from Crow. Fort Smith is our nearest town, and even then it's like a dead end to nowhere. So we were stuck at home waiting. And I remember when we were waiting, our front door rang. And I opened the door and looked in the snow, and there was no footprints, no tire tracks. And I told my grandpa, "Nobody's here." And he said, "What?" And I said, "There's nobody here." And he said, "Well, go inside then." So I went inside, and so, I looked in the snow. There was nobody there. I told my grandpa. He told me to go inside because his house was built like a farmhouse. So you have your first door, then you have the little stairway up, and then it's a second door, and then there's a stairway downstairs, and then you go across, and there's a door there. But it's crazy how it's built because everything's above, like high, like it looks like it was meant for like a flood if a flood was to happen. Is what I'm thinking how they built it a long time ago. I don't know. But it's the same way for the outside, the other side of the house where we never used that door. And so I was sitting there with my grandpa, and he could tell I was scared, but he just looked at me and said, "Knock it off. Don't be afraid because then it's going to bother us more." Okay, Grandpa, I'm in 7th grade. I'm trying not to be afraid of something I can't see. But clearly it has, the willpower to knock on the door and then ring the doorbell 3 times. Okay, I'm not going to be afraid, but I'm still afraid. And I remember sitting there trying to watch the TV with my grandpa, and then all of a sudden the other door rang, the bell, and it knocked. And I looked at my grandpa, and he said, "Well, go check." So I did. Same thing, looked down at the ground, no footprints, no trail around the house. And we went back. I went back and told him, "Nobody's here." And he said, "What?" And then my grandpa was sitting on the recliner, and we heard it again. So same thing. And this time he followed me because I looked at him like, "Can you come with me? I'm scared." And he said, "Let's go." So we walked to the front door, and I look outside, and me and him both seen somebody in the garage that was on the property, kind of far from the house. I think they tore it down now, but you could see somebody going around in that garage. And my grandpa thought they were going to steal my uncle's tools, so he had me run over there. I put on my snow boots and my coat, ran with my flashlight, turned on my flashlight because I thought I seen somebody in the corner. There was nobody. Nobody was there. Now, so another story that happened in that house the same time, the two winters before we left. Me and my 2 younger sisters were home alone, and that wasn't uncommon for us to be home alone, but we were home alone. She told, I knew she was going to the restroom because she said, "Here, you can have the remote." So I took it, and I was flipping through the channels, and I seen her at the corner of my eye stop, and she was looking into our grandma's room. Now, we used to say our grandma's room was the Holy of Holies. That's the safest place in the house because she had all these Catholic things all over. Rosaries and, holy oil and whatnots. And so we always said that's the safest room in the house. And I watched her standing there looking into my grandma's room, and I heard her go, "Ah!" And I heard a bang. And when I went back there and looked, all my grandma's stuff on her headboard was knocked over. And my sister ran into the bathroom, and it took her a minute to come out. But when she came out, she told me that she watched the curtain be lifted into the air, and it was like somebody was holding the blind. It wasn't a curtain, it was a blind. It was a plastic kind of to use the string to turn, to open and close, and that little stick thing. And she said she seen it up in the air, like somebody was holding it, like looking at it, like, what is this? And when she went, it dropped, and it knocked all our grandma's stuff over. So we had to go in there fast and pick up her bed and clean it, you know, so my grandma didn't think we're digging around. And I remember our uncle lived across, again, a field, and we called him and his wife, and he came over and sat with us until somebody came home, because we were scared. We were afraid to be in that house after that. Once, you know, you can tell something's gonna touch things. And, you know, I know some people say, like, you shouldn't be afraid of a spirit because they can't hurt you. But what is it? What are you telling me when you have kids telling you that, you know, hey, it can turn off the lights, it can dim it and make it bright, or it can lift up things, or it can ring the doorbell, it can touch things. And that's where I disagree with people, because I'm like, no, spirits have that capability. They have something, and clearly, you know, it was there with us.